After submitting what I thought was a well-researched project with my Birdo video, some communities, mainly Reddit, have told me that my claim of Birdo being the first trans character in video games was wrong. A few people, these people, feel like the title belongs to another Nintendo character. Unless you are a person that just blindly selects videos whenever they want to watch YouTube, and if you are one of these people, then I am glad you were misfortunate enough to click on mine, then you already know who this character is. It's right there in the title after all. Samus is a great character and is definitely a good example of a strong female heroine in a media that is sorely lacking in that department. But is Samus really an example of a transgender character in video games as well? It's time to crack those fingers and get off that couch as we put on our investigation hats on this episode of Gonzo Media. The mystery of Samus being trans originated all the way back in the year 1994, and was actually started in the Japanese version of the Super Metroid Strategy Guide. As a fun little extra for buying the strategy guide, the writers of the book decided to do an interview with the Super Metroid development team. This interview is actually fully translated by the Metroid database user Capcom, and is worth a read for any Metroid fan. A link to where you can read this interview will be provided in this video's description. Though, please read it after you finish this video. You might forget and just leave, and that'll make me sad. So very, very sad.
Come back!
One of the fun things about this interview is that the writers asked the development team to let the readers know about any secrets about Samus that only they know about. While most of the team claimed to have no knowledge of any secrets, and the few that did was generally just something really inappropriate, like, I know where the mole on her body is, and her body proportions. One man said something that caught the eyes of many. This man, a guy named Hirofumi Matsuoka, claimed that Samus isn't a woman. As a matter of fact, she's actually a new half. New half? What's that mean? For those of you who are unaware, the term new half is a blanket term for transgender individuals in Japan, and is usually used to refer to trans women who still have masculine genitalia. The term new half tends to be used alongside imagery of sex workers and is very similar to the extremely derogatory English term she-male. Even though Hirofumi's quote is pretty offensive, to a lot of people it is all they needed to form the opinion that Samus Aran is trans. Myself, however, I'm not quite as convinced. As one might have picked up in my other videos, I consider Word of God to be a pretty important factor in deciding if a character represents the LGBTQ+ spectrum. The issue with Hirofumi here is that I wouldn't exactly consider his word to be the words of the Metroid god. Hirofumi is credited for working on both Metroid and Super Metroid, but only for doing background designs for Metroid, and he was also only really part of the graphics team for Super Metroid. It seems very unlikely that Hirofumi Matsuoka had anything to do with the actual creation of Samus Aran as a character. So his claims of Samus being trans has no real value to it without the backing of someone more important. Does this claim have backing from any of the main creators? Actually, the exact opposite happened. Back around the time Metroid Zero Mission was made, Metroid director and series co-creator Yoshio Yakamoto monitored a part of Zero Mission's official website. This section of the website, known as Development Room, had a page called Metroid FAQ. People could submit questions and comments about the series that would all be answered by Yakamoto himself. All of these FAQs and responses have all been translated, and can be read by following the link in the description below. Just remember to come back after you read it. Please, I'm begging you.
Come back!
One question asked, I wanted to play Metroid, but will you port it to the PlayStation 2? It would be most helpful. Which Sakamoto answered by essentially saying it's about as likely as Samus being transgendered. Considering Metroid is still an exclusive Nintendo-owned franchise and has not appeared on any Sony console, it seems unlikely that Samus actually is trans. When we take a step back and look at some of Samus's origins as told in games, interviews, and manga, of which there are several, the information provided to us tends to contradict the statement made by Hirofumi. In all of these origins, Samus is portrayed as a female, even all the way back to when she was a toddler. While I agree that you can't make these types of judgments in the real world, as not everyone's gender identity matches their physical appearance, and I can even agree that some kids are able to understand that they are trans at a young age, I don't feel like either of those things are at play here. You see, when you design anything in an artistic medium, no matter what it is, there's a level of clarity that you need to provide to your audience. It's why a lot of books go in way too much detail to explain even some simple things, and is one of the reasons why characters like Mario and Mickey Mouse have gloves and very detailed and descriptive features. It makes them identical, and so you can see them and know right away what that is. I feel that if Samus was intended to be a part of the LGBTQ spectrum, that it would have been conveyed in some way in her backstory or her actual design. As we've talked about before, Japan isn't exactly subtle when they make a lot of queer characters in anything. Since there is nothing in her backstory that even hints to the possibility of Samus being trans, that secret Hirofumi had becomes even more debunked. One final point that I would like to make is the surprise, and also the sex appeal, of finding out that Samus is a woman. For those of you who are unaware, Samus's gender was always explained as being male throughout the English game manual. The Japanese game manual took it a step farther by instead referring to Samus as an it, in an attempt to make it look like Samus was actually a robot. If you are able to beat the game in under 5 hours, Samus takes off her helmet, revealing that she was a woman in the armor all along. Beating the game under 3 hours has Samus take more armor off, revealing that she was wearing a pink leotard underneath. Even better, if you're able to beat the game in 1 hour or less, you again get to see Samus removing her armor, but instead of the leotard, you get to see Samus in a teeny bikini. You gotta love that 8-bit pixelated sex appeal. The reason I feel like this shows that Samus was never intended to be trans is because I don't think Japanese game developers are brave enough to display a trans woman as a symbol of beauty. Even to this day, Japanese representation of queer characters is pretty damn awful. Do you agree with Daddy? So imagine just how negative and plain offensive it would have been back in 1986. It was basically the Dark Ages then. If you haven't figured it out by now, I am not one of those people that believe Samus is trans. Would I have liked her to be? Of course I would. I feel like every medium should have a good level of diversity of people of all backgrounds, and having a strong, non-villainized sorry, Birdo. Trans character in a video game would have likely aided in ending the terrible transphobia that still exists. I will say though, I do believe that Samus is a great role model, and is one of the best female characters in video games as a whole. Samus is strong and independent, and goes against the stereotype that females in video games need to be damsels in distress. Samus doesn't need no man, and having her whine over male characters in Other M is one of the main reasons that game is trash. As always, thank you all for watching. Do you think Samus is trans? Are there any bits of information that are out there that I missed that support the claim? Are there any LGBTQ characters out there that you feel deserve to be talked about? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you all have a wonderful day, but more importantly, I hope all of you are as excited for Prime 4 as I am.